Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. The final week of Ramadan, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our prayers and our fasting, our night prayers, our supplications, our dua, to accept from us and our families and all of our congregation and all Muslims inshallah across the world. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from those that give in charity and those that turn to Him in humility and those that attain high character in this month. Allahumma ameen. Tonight's reminder is actually a very special story from the Seerah. Many people don't know this story. And first let me tell you about some of the character we'll learn from the Prophet ﷺ. Sometimes you deal with people, they see only two colors when they deal with others. They see only pure good or pure evil. Sometimes, if somebody does something good to them, they're an angel, and they treat them so well, and they love them. And the moment they make the smallest mistake, then they are the worst person ever to walk on the face of the planet. This is actually not part of the Islamic character. And this story today speaks about the character we should have in place of this. It is a story of the Prophet ﷺ and his son-in-law. The famous son-in-laws of the Prophet ﷺ are who? Sayyidina Ali ibn Abutaleb. But the story today is not about him. Another son-in-law of the Prophet ﷺ is Sayyidina Uthman ibn Affan. But actually today's story is about the husband of Zaynab bint Muhammad. And her husband is named Abutaleb ibn Rabi'a. Abutaleb ibn Rabi'a. Abutaleb was married to Zaynab, the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ, before his prophethood, before he got the first revelation at the age of 40. So they were married in Mecca. But Abutaleb, Sayyidah Khadija is his maternal aunt. So that makes Zaynab his first cousin. Abutaleb, his maternal aunt, is Sayyidah Khadija, the wife of the Prophet. So his wife Zaynab is his first cousin. They were married, but then the Prophet ﷺ attained the first revelation. And sometime after that, Zaynab became Muslim. But Abutaleb did not believe in the prophethood of the Prophet ﷺ. So can you imagine, the Prophet is who? It's his father-in-law. And the Prophet is telling people that he is coming with a message from the Lord of the worlds. And his son-in-law doesn't believe him. So you can imagine the difficulty of this situation. And actually, very early in the prophethood, Quraysh wanted to hurt the Prophet ﷺ. And of course, they tried physical, abuse of weak Muslims and so on, and harassing our Prophet ﷺ. But they tried something very evil. They said, how about we harm him in his family relations? So they went to the husbands of his daughters to convince them to divorce his daughters. And this might have even been heavier on our Prophet ﷺ than any direct attack on his person, because this is an attack on his family. So his daughters, Kulthum and Ruqayya, were married to the sons of Abu Lahab, Utbah and Utaybah. They were married in the sense that they had done the nikah, the contract, but they hadn't consummated their marriage yet. And indeed, Abu Lahab convinced his two sons to both divorce the daughters of the Prophet ﷺ. And they stayed, especially Kulthum stayed without marriage, by the way, for many years. The companions really sacrificed so that we could know how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala today. Utbah, the son of Abu Lahab, went to Abutaleb, our main character today. And he told him, why don't you divorce Zaynab as well? Then the Prophet would have 3 divorces among his daughters. Abu al-As said maybe a sentence that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewarded him for many years later. Utbah told him, if you divorce Zainab, we will marry you your choice among the women of Quraysh. Abu al-As said, I would never divorce my beloved. He said, Sahibati, my companion, when he spoke of his wife. And he said, and I would not trade her for any woman among the women of Quraysh. Remember, we were saying, don't treat people like 2 shades, pure good or pure evil. This is a very decent stance. And the Prophet ﷺ recognizes this. So although Abu al-As is making a big mistake by rejecting his prophethood, the Prophet ﷺ is nonetheless saying, I have never found him except as an excellent son-in-law. Because he's really taking good care of his daughter. And he's honoring Zainab. And this is a very honorable statement. So the Prophet ﷺ doesn't act like this doesn't exist because Abu al-As has other mistakes. He recognizes his good and his bad. The years pass, and the Prophet ﷺ makes hijrah to Al-Madinah. But Zainab stays behind in Mecca with her husband Abu al-As ibn Rabi'a. And then 2 years after the hijrah comes the famous Badr expedition, the Battle of Badr. And then is the greatest surprise. Abu al-As ibn Rabi'a takes his place among the army of the Mushrikeen to go in war against his father-in-law. You can imagine how difficult this is for Zainab and how difficult this is for the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Imagine your son-in-law not only is calling you a liar, but is in the opposing camp in war against you. Of course, the Muslimin were given victory in this battle of Badr, and Abu al-As was among the prisoners of war. Our Prophet ﷺ told the Muslims to treat the prisoners of war with honor and decency. But Zainab was very moved for her husband. And so it was a practice that the prisoners of war could be, you could give a ransom, some money to free the prisoners of war. So Sayyidah Zainab didn't have enough money. So she took off a necklace that she had and she gave it as ransom for Abu al-As. When the Prophet ﷺ received this necklace, he was very moved, the narration tells us. And in one narration it says the companions saw the tears in his eyes. Because this was the necklace that Khadija, his wife who had passed away then, this was the necklace she gave her daughter on occasion of their wedding. So you can imagine how moved our Prophet ﷺ. But remember in Hadithat al-Ifk, we learned the Prophet ﷺ never used his authority as a prophet or a head of state to discharge his personal affairs. And so when he spoke to the companions, he said, if you wish, if you allow, you would return her to Zainab, her prisoner, meaning her husband, and her money. Is this a command or not? It's not a command. So it's up to the companions. It is an offer. It's something that the Prophet would love to see out of gentleness to his daughter. And indeed our companions were also of the highest character, and so they did this, but they did it out of choice, not out of force. And Abu al-As, when the Prophet ﷺ sent him back to Mecca, I think he could put every rule and every stipulation he wanted. But rather our Prophet ﷺ sent back Abu al-As, and he asked for one thing. He asked him to return Zainab, because now the revelation had come prohibiting Muslim women from marrying those of other faiths. Before this came later at that time, so earlier than that, Zainab was married to Abu al-As. Abu al-As went back to Mecca. And Abu al-As, as we're learning, one of his greatest characteristics is he fulfills his commitments. He's a very loyal person and he's an honest person. So he came back and he told Zainab to prepare herself and her belongings to go back to her father, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the Prophet had sent Zayd ibn Haritha and a man from the Ansar. But as Zainab was getting ready to leave with their daughter, Quraysh was very moved. And they were unhappy that the daughter of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is going to leave this easily. Remember, they were moved by the loss in Al-Badr. They were hoping to extinguish the Muslim civilization at that time. And so a group of Quraysh went out to make some noise until one of them grabbed an arrow and shot the mount of Sayyidah Zainab. The thing that she was riding on the animal, was struck by an arrow. And she was so shaken, she was pregnant at the time, and she lost her deceased unborn baby. She had a miscarriage. Our companions suffered a lot. Islam wasn't cheap for them. Our mother, Sayyidah Zainab, must have felt that she was going to die, and she was really moved. But again, this family of al-As, Abu al-As ibn Rabi'a, very decent family, though they have their mistakes. So Abu al-As didn't take his wife and leave her and say good luck in the desert. He sent his brother, so her brother-in-law was with her, and her brother-in-law took a stance here. He didn't say, Zayd, you take care of it, or good luck, or no, I didn't sign up for this. He took a stance, and he stood, and he said, anyone that comes near Zainab, I will deal with him personally. And remember, he's not a Muslim, and this isn't his wife. But this was the honor of this family. Sayyidah Zainab receded to Mecca, and then left at night and went to Al-Madinah al-Munawwara without her husband. But then we'll take one last scene from this incredible journey of this couple. Abu al-As is still not Muslim. And Abu al-As takes a trade expedition of Quraysh and goes and profits from international trade, as was the habit of the Arabs. And coming back, they meet the Muslim army, and in fact the Muslims capture the money of this expedition, and Abu al-As himself is taken prisoner again. This time Abu al-As escapes. But how is he going to go back to Mecca and he just lost all of their money, all of their investment, and he's going to say, I lost it. But he won't be able to show his face in Mecca. But he goes to Al-Madinah at night, he sneaks in. But where is he going to go to Medina, right? Where is he going to go? So which house do you think he knocks on? He knocks on the house of his ex-wife, Sayyidah Zainab. I think your imagination could say now what any person in the place of Sayyidah Zainab would say or do to Abu al-As after having lived all of this time. I mean, now we're talking about 10 years and all of these years. He said, Zainab, the Arabs had a practice when one would be fearful for themselves. If a person would take them into their protection, the Arabs were honorable people. So no one would come anywhere near her. So he didn't ask a man, he asked Zainab to give him protection to enter Al-Madinah. Zainab allowed him to enter the house and left her own house for Abu al-As. And she gave him that protection. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he heard this from Zainab, it was actually the time of Fajr Salah, and it must have been very difficult for our Messenger ﷺ, because he turned to his companions and he said, did you hear what I heard? And he said, I swear by Allah, I knew nothing of this. Because it's very awkward that his daughter is giving protection to Abu al-As, who seems to constantly be making problems. Right? Well, what happens? Again, our Prophet ﷺ will not give a command, because this is the system of the Arabs. This is before the time of standing armies. And so this is the normal economical system, the way that Arabia works. But he offered the companions a choice, that whomever wishes to return the spoils of war to the Abu al-As would do so. But it was exclusively the companion's choice. The narration says every companion gave back everything they had until there was nothing of the property of Abu al-As that was not returned to him. And he took all of this property and went back to Mecca. The end of the story is what? The end of the story is that when you give people a chance and you don't make them feel like they're pure evil, that gives a chance for that good that's hiding in there to resurface. So Abu al-As took his money back, all this money back to Quraysh. And he asked the people, "Oh Quraysh, are you missing anything from the money that you entrusted me with?" And Quraysh said, "Jazakallahu khayran, may God reward you." And they said, indeed, he has returned everything to them. So Abu al-As said, "As for me, I bear witness that there is none worthy of worship but Allah, and that Muhammad is his messenger. And nothing stopped me from saying this, except that I feared that if I said it earlier, you would say I was greedy with the money and I wanted to run with it to, his wife and the Muslims and so on." Abu al-As till this moment is still 100% committed to trust and to decency. Our Prophet ﷺ said a beautiful statement about Abu al-As ibn Rabi'a. He said, "Haddathani fasadaqani." He spoke to me and he said the truth. وَوَعَدَنِي فَوَفَّى لِي. And he promised me and he fulfilled his covenant and his promise. How rare are these two things to find among people today? That when they speak, they say the truth, and when they promise, they mean it, and they fulfill what they did. Abu al-As, actually, Sayyidah Zainab died in the 8th year of Hijrah. And Abu al-As died just about a year after our Messenger ﷺ died. But actually, their daughter was the granddaughter of the Prophet ﷺ, very beloved to him, and she would come to marry Ali ibn Abutaleb after the death of Fatima. She would marry him during the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab. So the legacy of this great family lived on and on, but the legacy would have never seen the light of day if it weren't for the character of our Messenger ﷺ that gave Abu al-As. It wasn't a day, it wasn't a month, it was indeed years, it was over 10 years. But then Abu al-As became not a good man, not a historical figure, but nothing less than a companion of the Prophet ﷺ. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us patience in taking the hands and helping those that are struggling with their faith and helping them become better, and being patient with the shortcomings of people, as our Prophet ﷺ was patient with his son-in-law, Abu al-As ibn Rabi'a. Allahumma ameen. Assalamu alaikum.